Peninsula, or Train to Busan Presents Peninsula, whatever you want to call it, is the spin-off slash sequel to the highly successful and also really bloody good 2016 South Korean zombie movie Train to Busan. For those of you that don't know, I absolutely love the original Train to Busan. In my opinion, it's actually one of the best horror movies of the last decade, purely because it doesn't actually feel like a horror movie. If anything, it just feels like an action thriller that is incredibly tense, and it just so happens to have zombies in it. But it also did a really good job of revitalizing the zombie subgenre at the same time, because by that point in time, that subgenre had kind of been milked to death, which is why Train to Busan was a nice breath of fresh air, which is why when I saw the trailer for Peninsula, this spin-off slash sequel to that film, I was very skeptical. Purely because the original doesn't warrant a sequel. It's a perfectly well-rounded story with a start, middle, and end, and it's just, perfectly packaged in that way. It doesn't call for a continuation of that story, which is why Peninsula follows a completely different set of characters 4 years after the events of Train to Busan, which I guess is fine for the sake of this movie, but I'm just going to say it now, I really wasn't a fan of this film. So much so that in the original movie, I could remember the characters and I could remember specific scenes that happened, and a lot of it was very memorable because it stuck in your head and it was very visceral throughout almost all of its runtime. Whereas Peninsula, I can't remember any of the characters. The plot was pretty bog standard for this type of movie, and it overall was just a very forgettable experience. If I had to squeeze some form of a positive out of this movie, then the most I can say is that the opening 5 minutes are genuinely brilliant. It feels like it's perfectly capturing the same feel and style as Train to Busan had, and it almost feels like it's setting up Train to Busan but on a boat. Now, if they'd gone for that for this sequel, like kind of the same thing as Train to Busan but on a different mode of transport, yeah, it might feel a bit gimmicky, but it might have worked a lot more effectively than what we initially got. And because those opening 5 minutes do feel like that's what it is setting up, and it just feels as raw and as unfiltered as the original was, I was genuinely kind of excited. If the whole movie was to stay like that, I was genuinely thinking to myself, this might actually be good. But like I said, that's just the opening 5 minutes. Once the movie actually starts and the plot kicks into gear, all you really get is a very bog-standard post-apocalyptic zombie movie that just feels like every other post-apocalyptic zombie movie. Like, if you were to show me a scene from this and a scene from, I don't know, season 9 of The Walking Dead, outside of the fact that one cast is Korean and the other is, American, I don't think I'd be able to tell the difference. This movie is just so painfully average in almost every sense. It's quite hard to actually talk about this movie, considering it is the predecessor of such a brilliant movie. The fact that this is even related to Train to Busan annoys me, because that movie was so good and such a lightning in the bottle sort of thing. And then you have this as the follow-up, and it is just so average on every level that I genuinely don't know how to express into words how disappointed and annoyed I am at this movie. And what pains me even more is that this is the exact same director and writer as the first movie. So this isn't a case of, oh, we just want to rush a sequel out there, let's just bring someone else in to direct it. No, this is the exact same director as Train to Busan. So there should be some level of quality in this movie. And I will give him his due. There are 1 or 2 scenes in particular that are actually kind of tense and that are well handled. But they are very scattered throughout the movie. There's literally like 1 or 2 that I can pinpoint for being either pretty inventive and very well executed or just being very tense. But like I said, they're very scattered throughout the movie. There's literally like 1 or 2 throughout the whole film. Apart from that, this movie just feels incredibly generic in almost every sense. There's also an incredible reliance on CGI. I genuinely don't know why this movie has so much CGI in it, especially in places where it doesn't necessarily need CGI, which is another thing that downgrades the movie for me, because the original had a nice blend of CGI and practical to the point where they just blended together quite seamlessly for the most part. This movie, when there's CGI on the screen, it's very obvious, especially this car chase that takes up, I think, the last act of the movie. A lot of it just looks like a video game. And I'm not exaggerating that. It genuinely looks like I'm playing... I was watching a cutscene from, say, I don't know, Uncharted or The Last of Us or something like that. It genuinely looked like a video game, but that's because there is such a heavy reliance on CGI in this movie that it just takes you out of the moment even more than you already were, which really is a shame. Even the story for this film is nowhere near as interesting as the original. The first movie focused on a father who was trying to reconnect with his daughter whilst all this zombie stuff was happening. Whenever the movie needed to bring you back down to reality during the quieter moments, it would always have that as the main pulling force of that film. Whereas this movie, the main plot is a group of from Hong Kong going into the infected area of South Korea to find a truck full of money because these gangsters are going to kill them otherwise. That is literally the plot of the film, and it is so, again, painfully generic and average that it just... I genuinely don't know why this is even related to Train to Busan, considering how brilliant that film was, and we end up with this such meh film. Just really baffles me. I at the end of the day, I was really disappointed by this movie, although that being said, I wasn't really expecting much. The trailers looked very meh. Everything about this film was kind of setting that up, and despite a very promising opening scene, the rest of the movie just doesn't deliver any of that visceral excitement and energy that the original had, or even any interesting characters for that matter, which is why I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. This is one of the most painfully average movies I've seen in a while, and like I said already, the fact that it is even related to such a brilliant film like Train to Busan is genuinely really criminal, and I don't even know why this film exists. So guys, that was my review for Peninsula, or Train to Busan Presents Peninsula. I don't even know which title it's meant to be, but it's one of the two. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.